The next session, Capturing the Elusive Infringer on the Internet. Before explaining the session and inviting the speakers, I'd like to remind that after today's sessions, there will be a reception at the exhibition hall. Then only for the VIP guests, there will be the gala dinner at Four Seasons Hotel, organized by the Turkish Ministry of Custom and Trade, where the buses to go to the hotel will leave here at 7:30 p.m. So I'd like to remind that. Bu panellerden sonra akşam saat 6'da exhibition fuaye alanında resepsiyon olacak. Saat 7.30'da da akşam gala yemeğine Four Seasons Otel'de Gümrük ve Ticaret Bakanlığı'nın gala yemeğine sadece VIP davetiyesi olan kişiler için otobüsler buradan akşam 7.30'da kalkacaktır, hatırlatmak istedim. Capturing the Elusive Infringer on the Internet. This session will examine progress on how enforcement officials and right holders are addressing counterfeiting and piracy on the Internet through collaboration, identification of websites providing infringing illicit goods, Internet sales, the role of postal services, express freight moving small consignments, current joint efforts to address the counterfeiting and piracy on the Internet, future and emerging challenges to online enforcement, such as expansion of generic top-level domains. Now I'd like to invite the moderator, Ms. Candice Lee, External Relations Manager of Anti-Counterfeiting, INTA, to introduce the speakers and moderate the panel. Hello.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the panel. I'd like to invite the speakers to the panel on stage, starting with Bob Barchese, then Fred Fellman, Juan Hardy, and Norm Schenk, please. Thank you. We heard from many speakers earlier today, including some from the opening plenary, about how the world is becoming more globalized, which results in a lot of in blurred boundaries and blurred lines. It makes the world smaller, and it blurs social, cultural, and economic boundaries. And that's especially true on the Internet. So as we, as consumers, as businesses, as governments, operate in an ever more digital world, we have to be aware of the risks that are involved with operating on the Internet. So I'm very happy to have four very distinguished guests on the panel to talk about how we can address the issue of counterfeiting and piracy on the Internet. We'll be providing the speakers will be providing their presentations from their seats, so we hope to have a more discussion-style panel. And afterwards, we will be providing an opportunity for the audience to ask questions to our speakers. The first speaker will be Bob Barchese. He's the president of the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition. Prior to being president of the IACC, he was the director of investigations at the Recording Industry of America, and prior to that, the police chief, a police chief. Second will be Fred Fellman. Fred is the chief marketing officer of Markmonitor, which is part of Thomson Reuters, and he's responsible for defining and promoting Markmonitor's brand protection product offerings. And he's very involved in advocacy initiatives, including those on Internet governance. Then we have Juan Hardy. He's the Microsoft Director for EMEA, Anti-Piracy and Digital Crime. He oversees the company's EMEA's enforcement effort and intelligence efforts against organized crime and other illicit organizations engaged in piracy and other illegal activity. And lastly, we have Norm Schenk. He's the UPS Vice President for Public Affairs, and he's here representing the Global Express Association, which he will introduce in his presentation. So let's welcome Bob Barchese to make the first presentation for the session.
They couldn't hear me, huh? So thank you, Candace. I want to thank the Global Congress for inviting us to present today. And as way of introduction about the ICC, and I have a few slides I'm going to show today. The ICC, I'm here representing over 250 member companies today, and we cut across various industries from apparel, automotive, luxury goods, pharmaceuticals, to food, entertainment, and software. And part of what we're going to speak about today is this tremendous challenge and threat that we face on the internet, and this online challenge is just going to continue to grow. I just wanted to share a couple facts with the crowd. One is consumers spent $571 billion online in 2010. There were 150 billion online transactions, and there were 2 billion internet users. And this is just going to continue to grow, and the trend is that this is going to continue to build up, and more consumers are going to use online resources to shop. So looking at the landscape and listening to my members, we said, how can we combat this problem? A lot of folks look at domain takedowns, and it's sort of a whack-a-mole approach. They come up, and as soon as they take them down, there's 5 more to take their place. So we explored a program which has now been in effect for about 16 months, where we're looking to follow the money. And this is a global program, and we've made global partners. And we actually put this program together working with Victoria Espinel at the White House. And you could see, and there's proof of concept when it comes to following the money, whether it's the narcotic trade or it's people selling counterfeit goods. They're in the business to make money. Money is the lifeblood that continues to keep these folks in business. And we wanted to take a look at how can we attack this and be very efficient at doing it. So we built a system, and we made agreements with some of the biggest financial institutions in the world. So our partners consist of MasterCard, Visa Europe, Visa International, American Express, PayPal, Diners Club, Discover, Pulse, and also we just started to get some money transfer companies in, such as MoneyGram, and we're pretty optimistic that Western Union, we've been in discussions with them, that will bring them into the program and into the system. So how does this work? Basically, the big concept and the big goal is, around the world there's about 3,000 acquiring banks. Acquiring banks are the banks that merchants use to collect money for transactions. Out of those 3,000 banks, there's probably 400 or 500 banks that are willing to take on high-risk merchants. So the program's goal is to, one, decrease the amount of banks that are willing to take on high-risk merchants, and as a result, drive up the cost to the counterfeiters that go online. So, and the third part of it is, if you're a consumer and you're looking to shop online, if the particular website doesn't take Visa or doesn't accept MasterCard or doesn't accept American Express, most consumers aren't going to go look for e-gold and try to buy a counterfeit good. So again, it's to dissuade the consumers by limiting their options on payment systems. It's to shrink that universe where they could accept payments through these particular banks or credit card companies. So part of the program is, if you want to get a website, if a brand takes a website down, they want to put another one, the bad guys can get another website up pretty easily and quickly, and Fred could speak to some of that. What they can't do, though, is get merchant accounts that easily. And if they look to get a new merchant account, a lot of the payment systems have a program, a match system it's called, where if you've had a problem before, you're in that system. And that depends on what part of the world you're in, because there is some privacy concerns, especially in Europe. If you go in just to get a new relationship with a bank, it's very costly, very expensive. So you'll see on the slide, there's a lot of different things you have to do to get those accounts up and running. So I already mentioned who our partners are. This is a little snapshot of what our system looks like. So the ICC invested a lot of money in building a portal system. We have our rights holders who use different companies to crawl the web to find the infringing sites, because we can't be the experts on every different product line of the members we represent. They send an affidavit up through our system. We do a legal review. I have an attorney that's assigned to the project. We have law enforcement involved in this, so the IPR Center, which is a fusion center in the United States, and they take a look at it, and if they check off a box, they say, Bob, don't proceed with this because they're doing a criminal investigation, then we don't send it up to the credit card companies. So they're a partner. Ultimately, it goes to the affected credit card companies, and based on terms of service agreements that they have with merchants, with acquiring banks, they could fine these banks significant funds. And that's a way to dissuade them ultimately from keeping that merchant or payment facility or payment processor on board. So this is just some of the benefits, because if you think about it, you may get a submission from Nike. Nike may be looking at the same site as Converse, as Adidas, and then the credit card companies would get 50 complaints on one site. Then you as a brand holder would have to send your complaints over to various different payment methods. With this, there's a deconfliction system so that if Nike already submitted the claim, Adidas will know that somebody submitted the claim. What we found is a lot of sites that purport to accept these credit cards. They may purport to accept them, but actually not accept them, which taxes a lot of the credit card companies' resources. So we drill down in that too. So you can see across up on your screen a lot of the different benefits of this centralized reporting system. So this comes from we do a report for the White House every year, and this is part of that report, or this is actually more up to date. So during the course of doing this, up to date, we identified over 17,000 payment channels, of which I think about 1,300 or 1,400 merchant accounts were terminated. And what we found as we went through the program is when we first started, we found individual merchants would be setting up through payment processes, and payment processes basically do the customer service, the processing of the payments. So they would set these up. What we found out later on as we started to do this more was we made them change the way they do business. So what they did is we found payment processors now looking for counterfeiters. So they would build what they would think would be bulletproof sites, and they would seek out counterfeiters. They don't care if it's pharma as opposed to selling luxury goods. And as we went through this, as you can see this list, the complaints that we get, 95% of those complaints are processed through these 15 or 20 payment processors that we list up on your screen. So what does that mean? That means that we turn around and we go back to the credit card companies and say, what are you doing about these folks? What the credit card companies did is they sent underwriters out to China. They reviewed these folks' books. The one thing the credit card companies can't control, and where they do bounce around a little bit, these folks, is if they're with the Bank of China initially, they'll reapply with the Bank of China Industrial, and then the Bank of China Communications, but there's not that many major banks in China that they could go to. And they expose themselves to a lot of risk when they do that, because if they got fined the first time by the credit card companies tell the next bank, these folks are high risk, and ultimately, if you get caught with them selling counterfeit goods, we're going to fine you significantly. So where are we going now with the program? We want to expand it, and I think Fred's going to talk a little bit more about this. What we also found is when you take one merchant down, you could take down thousands of websites, because these folks are affiliates, and I call them drivers. So you have affiliates and spam and search engines and folks that drive people to the website, and they get a portion of the proceeds when these folks sell goods. And then you have a manager that sets up all these web pages, and Microsoft's on my panel, and they have some significant programs where they could track down by basically a web page DNA, and they could find 4,000 or 5,000 of those same web pages for one merchant. So we're moving forward on doing some of this affiliate mapping. We're moving forward on actually taking down the domains after we shut down a merchant account. And the reason we want to do that is basically for optics, because a lot of brands say, hey, I know it doesn't process the payments, but the site's still up there. And the big thing we're doing, and we'll be announcing it probably at my conference next week, but as a preview, we're going to be including online marketplaces. That becomes a big issue for my members. So that's phase 2 of the program. This is a little bit about the affiliate mapping. And if you think about this, because when I was talking to our financial partners, and they said, you know, Bob, we have the same issue, because the website's up and it has our logo on it, and we have a problem taking it down. And if you sit back where I sit, you say, this doesn't make a lot of sense, because 16 people are taking shots at the same site. So Nike may be trying to take the site down. Adidas might be trying to take the site down. The credit card companies are trying to take the same site down because they don't want their logos up there. So we're partnering up and collaborating on that. And the collaboration really extends significantly, where we partner up with the credit card companies. We go around the world, and they bring in the banks and the payment processors, and basically I stand side by side with Visa or MasterCard or American Express and say, look, if you're in the business of selling counterfeit goods, we're working together to shut you down, and we're working together to make sure Visa and MasterCard finds you significantly. So just in closing, you could see, how do you know how effective this is and what the impact is? So this is a couple things. Based on the program, Visa found an affiliate blog, and it said, Visa's burning us with napalm, because they couldn't, and this was a pharma issue that they dealt with. The Bank of China, I was doing a presentation with MasterCard, and the Bank of China came up to me and said, because of your program, we got fined hundreds of thousands of dollars. So being a politically correct person I am, I said, good. AliExpress and Alipay International, which a lot of you folks are familiar with, Taobao. As an experiment and a pilot program, we put 4 claims in through our system, and as a result of those 4 claims, one of the credit card companies fined Alipay $800,000 for 4 claims. And the reason I know that, it's not because the credit card company told me, it's because I got a call from Alibaba Group, and they said, we want to meet with you, and they flew to Washington, D.C., because they don't want to get $800,000 worth of fines just based on 4 claims. So they came in to talk to us, to work with us, and, you know, we're still talking to them, so we'll see what happens with that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. The title of the panel is Capturing the Elusive Infringer on the Internet, but you found a very innovative way to not capture the infringer, but their source of funding and their money and what they really want out of selling counterfeits. So next we have Fred Feldman from Markmonitor, who will provide us with a few remarks.
Thank you, Candace. Oops, I have to turn on my. Thank you, Candace, and thank you to INTA, WIPO, the ICC, and the other sponsors of this event. By way of introduction, Markmonitor is part of Thomson Reuters, the IP and Sciences group, and our job really is to establish or help companies establish, monetize, and protect their intellectual property. And as such, we're working with most of the global 2,000 companies in one way or another as part of Thomson Reuters, and Markmonitor ourselves work with about 50% of the Fortune 100. And today, I wanted to talk to you about a little bit about how shoppers perceive counterfeits and sort of look at the other side of this coin. And I'm using some very big data that we collect. We have about 1,000 processors running. We're scanning millions and millions of websites, about 220 million websites. We're looking at literally billions of product listings. We're categorizing them, we're parsing them when it comes to counterfeits, and we're analyzing that data. And at the end of last year, we released a report which we call the Shopping Report that allows brands to understand a little bit about what happens with consumers as they visit these sites. And I wanted to share some of that data with you and some of its uses as well. We really sought out to debunk a couple of myths. We hear things like this from some brand owners, things like people who are looking for counterfeits on the web aren't my customers, or people who end up, shopping for counterfeits on the web aren't my customers. We hear things like shoppers who look for or who buy counterfeits, who shop for them, are actually looking for them. We hear people say that my customers don't buy counterfeits. My real customers can discern the difference between a counterfeit good and a legitimate one. And we also hear that, that shoppers aren't confused by counterfeits. And we wanted to find some statistically valid information that supported debunking these myths. And I wanted to share with you the actual reality of the situation. If you look at these graphs on demographics, if you see symmetry in them, it means that there are basically equal audiences between people who visit legitimate sites and people who visit rogue sites or counterfeit sites. And you see a large amount of symmetry when we look at both age and race, and also household income and education. And by the way, I'm showing U.S. data, but we also ran this data against South Americans, as well as people who are shopping in Europe and in Asia, and the results are actually quite similar whether you're looking at the North American audience or other audiences. Where you do see some differences in this data is if you drill down on the type of good that folks are shopping for, and also sometimes in the region as well. Now, with respect to advertised price and discounting, because we're looking at legitimate goods as well as illegitimate goods, we wanted to look at average prices of the legitimate goods and cast them against the illegitimate goods. And what we found is that a large number of the listings are actually at plausible discounted rates. So when you look at the goods online, you could think to yourself that either this is the real thing because it's so marginally discounted, or it's an end-of-season discount. And by the way, the data that we're examining in this particular study is for luxury, apparel, footwear, and accessories. So the discounts are relatively the same, so very easily consumers could be confused by the pricing of this. And now what I'd like to explore with you is a little bit about intent. And I have a few words on this slide, and then I have a diagram that supports an understanding of the intent of the shopper. So just to understand what happened here with this particular survey is we found counterfeit sites and we found legitimate sites. We found the listings of particular items and goods. And then we took these items, both the legitimate listings and the illegitimate listings, and we pumped this data to Nielsen, and Nielsen sent us traffic data, and we parsed that traffic data. Within that traffic data, they also included information about referral search words. So if they came to us via Bing or via Google or via some other search source, we actually got the source of how they found those sites. And what we found is that bargain hunters who are shopping use terms like cheap and discount to find deals online. It's logical, it's what you would expect. And people who are actually looking for counterfeits use terms like fake and counterfeit to find those goods. And the bargain shoppers outnumber the folks who are looking for counterfeiters about 20 to 1. And of the bargain start to shop using these terms, 1 in 5 of those, or about 20% of those, end up on sites selling counterfeits based on our results. So they're very easily fooled by these sites because they look legitimate and they're looking for a deal. And of those who visited those counterfeit sites, 1 in 6 of those showed their intent to buy by visiting the shopping cart on those pages. So we know, in fact, that they were trying to buy goods on those sites and actually checked the price. We don't know if they actually pressed the pressed the purchase button at the end of that, but they showed their intent to buy, showing that they're very likely fooled by these sites. So there's how it is. The big group of ants on the left hand of the screen represent the folks who are looking for legitimate goods. The ones that visit counterfeit sites are the second set of smaller ants, and the ones that finally purchase or show their intent to purchase on the far right. So users are confused. These sites are professionally produced, the discounts are plausible, and the shoppers who visit those sites actually, these are discerning buyers. They spend 2.5 times more they actually go to 2.5 times more sites, and they spend 2 times more shopping. These are discerning buyers who are looking for deals. So what does it mean to brand owners? It means a couple of things. One, it means that for brand owners who are engaged in this, they should absolutely be engaging in all of these efforts to try and down these sites, either finding clusters of sites and using payment processor shutdowns, or using lawsuits, or using some means to find these sites and shut them down. But they should also be understanding how their consumers are fooled and trying to capture that information. There's been a lot of discussion at this conference about innovation. And one of the innovations that people can use to fight this is to use very large data to make the right decisions about how to fight the problem. And they can do it to some great result. Not only can they actually market to them using some of the information about search terms, the demographics and things like that, but they can also use it to leverage their efforts. One of the big trends in the U.S. Is to actually use a form of lawsuit to identify websites, to use email service, and then to actually bring down the sites in bulk. Very large brands sometimes see tens of thousands of individual rogue sites attacking one brand. And this is a case study of one brand that actually is using this type of data along with lawsuits to bring down these sites. In their first action, before using big data, they actually brought down a couple hundred sites. In the next action, they were able to bring down nearly 2,000 sites using big data. In the action after that, over 4,000. And in the next action planned, they're about to bring down a couple thousand more sites. The result is that because we're disturbing the operations of these organizations so profoundly through this method, through these lawsuits, that we're not seeing the sites come back again. They're moving on to other brands. And they're using, similarly, the information about networked sites and network data, as Bob described, to surgically use payment shutdowns to actually remove these sites and make their efforts more efficient. As a result, we're seeing companies take down 10 to 100 more sites in each activity, and we're seeing a reduction of the cost per site drop 7 to 10 times. And as a result, people are effectively able to fight this. It's a multi-headed problem. It's a problem that requires both marketing and education, as well as enforcement efforts. And it's one that actually brands are employing to actually make an impact on counterfeiting, piracy, and other problems. And with that, I'll turn it back to Candace.
Thank you, Fred, for the information. I thought the data you provided was really interesting, especially your point about using data to fight back and recapture the consumers who are confused and who are fooled by the counterfeiters. Very interesting. Next, we have Juan Harady from Microsoft. Juan will give us the copyright and piracy perspective and explain how that is affecting the copyright issues in community.
Thank you, Candice. Let me start off with a video to illustrate the story I'm going to tell you.
Fără un software original, lucrurile importante devin vulnerabile. Riști siguranța datelor, dar și a familiei tale. Cumpără Windows 7 original și primești Microsoft Security Essentials.
One of the things we're seeing today is that commercial online pirates are getting much more technically sophisticated and are making a lot more money than they used to do. I would like to highlight for you a case that Microsoft had been working for quite some time, in which the commercial online seller called itself, among other things, City Cheap. This was a small group of pirates based in Eastern Europe that were identified in 2002. As you can see here, CDChip was a professional-looking e-commerce site with a simple business model, but a very sophisticated operation to trick customers into buying counterfeit Adobe, Symantec, and Microsoft software. Their operation evolved from originally delivering counterfeit disks to a download business model. For both of these businesses, this criminal ring ran around 2,000 e-commerce sites based on 75 different formats that they moved around frequently. Over the course of their operation, CDChip used 10,000 websites based in 18 countries and had domain names registered in 22 countries. The counterfeit and pirated software of CDChip was primarily advertised by email, by spam mail. This was sent using very sophisticated techniques, which included the criminal use of computer malware, botnets, and Trojan hijacked computers. Customers were enticed by the $50 to $100 price tag for Microsoft software, and they paid by credit card to one of 12 different merchant accounts that were based in different parts of the world. At the peak of their operation, the people behind CDChip were making $3.9 million a month. You may be interested to know that investigators found that the same criminal organization responsible for CDChip also owned servers that were used for pharmaceutical counterfeit sales and child pornography. It took us quite some time to identify and get to the bottom of this criminal organization. But through what was really a disruption strategy, Microsoft was able to work with law enforcement, ISPs, domain registrars, credit cards, and other financial institutions to shut funding to this criminal operation. The people behind CDChip are still not clear. No arrests have been made. But once the money stopped flowing to this criminal organization, customers were unable to buy their counterfeit products. We simply took the profit out of this criminal's business. It is so important for this reason that both governments and the public understand and are fully aware of the risks of software piracy, and online piracy in particular. Now, it's obvious that online counterfeiting and piracy hurt companies like us, Microsoft, that develop and sell software, and other companies that develop other branded and copyrighted goods. But one thing we try hard to get across is that consumers and businesses also get hurt when they use counterfeit or pirated goods that this type of criminals are distributing. For software, the risks are the security and safety of your computer. This is your personal information, your financial details, and other computer data. Microsoft commissioned IDC, the International Data Corporation, to conduct a study to quantify some of these risks, and the results were pretty shocking. Basically, IDC found that when a consumer or a business downloads counterfeit software from the internet, it will have computer performance problems 28% of the time. It will get or pick adware or Trojans, a Trojan program, 36% of the time. And it will get spyware 78% of the time. IDC also predicted that in 2003, 1 out of 3 computers that have counterfeit software installed worldwide are going to get infected with malware. That's 1 out of 3 worldwide. Now, to finalize, let me mention very briefly 5 lessons learned from cases like CD Chip that are helping us at Microsoft guide our efforts as we try to work smarter against counterfeiting and piracy. First one is, we're working hard to improve our investigation capabilities. Both our Intellectual Property Crimes Unit and our Digital Crimes Unit are coming together in one team, which is going to total 100 staff worldwide working on fighting piracy. The Digital Crimes Unit is our division that investigates and fights malware. So we're all coming together under one team and one leadership. We're also working more and more with other industry partners. More often we're working not only with, as obviously, with the rest of the software industry and the games industry, but we're also working with the pharmaceutical companies and brands groups. We're also doing some training in the financial industry, as we think it's so important for financial institutions to learn and understand how this type of criminal organizations are using their payment services to commit crimes. And then we're also strongly supporting and coordinating across borders with wider groups of law enforcement officials. Law enforcement officials not only need to be computer savvy to fight this type of crimes, but they also need to stay very well connected and informed. And finally, we believe it's so important to maximize public attention to the problem of counterfeiting and piracy. And we're trying hard to get the message out that criminal organizations are involved in online piracy, and they are getting increasingly sophisticated in taking your money. Also, that consumers and businesses take a big chance when they download or they choose counterfeit software. They are facing some big risks. And to conclude, I just wanted to tell you that criminals are moving faster than the speed of light, and we simply need to try to keep up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan, for your perspective on that. We're running a little bit low on time, so I'll just move on to Norm Schenk from the UPS, and who's representing the Global Express Association. Norm.
Thank you. Yes, I'm with UPS, and we're the largest international package company in the world. So obviously, IPR and counterfeiting is very important to us. But I wanted to educate you a little bit today on a broader group, which is the Global Express Association, which only has 4 members, but it's the 4 largest in the world, which are UPS, FedEx, DHL, and TNT. And we represent over 30 million shipments on a daily basis in over 200 countries and territories around the world. So the bottom line is, I won't read all the statistics, we cover the globe in terms of package delivery service, and we do that with a number of different services. Just to show you quickly about the delivery chain and how it works for us is, but we use highly sophisticated networks to collapse the time and processing for international shipments, and in most cases, a package, regardless of where we pick it up or deliver it, is going to get delivered between 24 and 72 hours, including customs clearance. So we have a very closed-loop process where we handle everything from time of pickup till the actual delivery to the customer. You can see from this pie chart here, just wanted to give you a little breakdown of the industry sectors of what we handle, and you can see very quickly, without going through the numbers, that the largest piece that we cover is high tech, which is about 29%. But if you just looked around, everything from retail to automotive to pharmaceuticals, all the different sectors that we touch are potential victims to IPR violations and counterfeiting. Also, I would want to say that from a service perspective, when I talk about what we handle, it's not just the large multinationals, but for us, actually our bread and butter is also the small and mid-sized companies, so it really is a true cross-section of all the different services and companies that are out there. Sharing a little more information with you, and I think they're going to make these slides available, so I'm going to go through them pretty quick, is that certainly seizures for IPR and counterfeiting have certainly grown over the last few years. Probably the best statistics that are out there are between Europe and the U.S. in those markets, because it's a little more sophisticated in terms of automation on that. But you can see by the chart here that the numbers have really grown. Now, the express carriers, of which GEA is a member, the numbers are not as big as they are for some of the traditional modes. That being said, we take it just as serious and are trying to do what we can to help interdict. You can see here on this chart here the volume of articles that have been seized. Again, most are in the traditional C mode in terms of the volume because the shipments are bigger on that. But again, we don't make any assumption based on what the size of the container is, because it's also very possible that a very small package that might have some very important pharmaceuticals for vaccines or something like that. So we don't like to get caught up in what the size of the packages or the volume, because it misses the point of what the enforcement is all about. That being said, value is an important risk indicator when it comes to screening, and it's not just high value. In many cases, it's artificially too low of a value, and we do some things that we have internal screenings that we do as an industry and working with customs on it, that we don't just look for the high value stuff and say we need to take a look at this. It's if something is abnormally low based on what's that, in some cases actually will raise a bigger alarm on that. We're asked to come today to speak about us as a service provider and what we can do as an industry to help. But one of the things that we wanted to point out, that we as an industry are also victims of IPR and counterfeiting. And when we talk about some of the previous speakers talking about how sophisticated some of the websites are getting, it's very common for them to use one of our logos on that website as if we're an endorsement, because we're legitimate companies, of what's being said. So we are quite often victims of that. And one of the things we've done over the years is that we've really increased our security of looking at websites and trying to work with those that control them to get those taken off. I did mention that we're not immune to the IPR violations, and we do basic background checks of our customers and screening under normal business principles that most would. At the end of the day, we do accept business on a good faith based on the relationships that we build with our customers on that. So from perspective of that. But we also recognize that rights holders are our customers too. So it's not that we feel obligated to do it. We feel a responsibility to do what we can, working with our legitimate customers and helping with that. And also reinforcing the relationships with customs. And for us, that's really the key thing, is working together with customs administrations. Here's some things related to intellectual property rights of what we're doing. We do a lot of working with customs system screening. In many cases, the countries that have availability, we provide them actually access to our systems for what we can legally provide to them, so that they can do some screening on that. Periodically, we work with them and provide facilities where they can come in and do blitzes, and if they identify a certain country that there might be a certain product at risk on a daily or a weekly basis, they can do that with the tools they have. But one point that I wanted to make on here is the third point, which is really the most effective enforcement of IPR infringements requires a broad cooperation and information sharing between three parties: the rights holders, customs, and the express carriers. So if we're going to be the most effective, we can't do it on our own, rights holders can't do it on their own, and customs can't. We must work collaboratively from a broad perspective to be the most effective. And while we want to do our part, at the same point, there's also needs to be an understanding, and we have this dialogue with customs administrations, that we can't be the enforcement arm of that. That's not our expertise. We can work with the three parties, as I talked about on that, but at the end of the day, we can't be responsible for enforcing on that. And I think, as the other panelists had mentioned, it's getting very complicated and difficult to do that. And then some of the other things, I touched base on these that we're doing, but again, our tracking and tracing capabilities we have the most sophisticated technology in terms of service provider. All our shipments, regardless of service and regardless of country of origin or country or destination, are entered into a system, provided advanced information to Customs Administration so they can look at it. Again, we look at facilities, looking at information, what we can do, and then, again, working with the right authorities to close accounts when we identify that there are bad accounts on that. And wrapping up in conclusion here, better information sharing, again, is going to be a key to moving forward, and we've learned that through some of the experience. There needs to be greater cooperation that is legal. So in some cases, there might be laws or regulations that needed to be changed. They must be sustainable. Also, whatever the solutions are, need to be economically viable. Operationally non-intrusive. We're making service commitments to our customers, and we need to do the best we can on that while following the law. Consistent in a global context, and this applies, my whole background is working with customs and it's all programs, but particularly in this one, there must be a harmonization of programs throughout the world. We can't come up with country-by-country solutions and expect to be effective on that. And I've reiterated several times the importance of including all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. Before we got on the stage and were talking about the panel, we had several questions we wanted to discuss within the group. But because of time, I just want to ask one question and then open it up to the audience for their own questions. And the question that I'd like to pose to each of you is sort of, what advice can you give to countries where e-commerce is a growing trend in their country, where more and more people are buying stuff online, where it's more popular for people to buy their things online rather than going into stores? In the U.S. and the EU, that e-commerce is a very, very popular way to go shopping, but for some other regions and countries, it's something that is growing. So they're facing these challenges, these challenges today. What advice can you give to those countries, whether they're government or businesses working in those countries? Does anyone want to start? Oh, okay, Bob.
So I think from the discussion today, you could see the key point is collaboration, right? So we work with credit card companies. Let me tell you what we learned and what I just learned on sitting up here on the panel. I should work with Norm and his group, because those same sites that we attack and those same sites that the credit card companies spend a lot of money on attacking, Norm has the same problem because his logo's up on those sites. So collaboration is the key. Let me tell you what I learned from Juan, and we work very closely with Microsoft. And I think what they learned from us, right? So Microsoft has great technology, they have great investigative skills. They learned how to map affiliates very professionally, it's very sophisticated. They have the tools to do that. I think what they learned is to leverage the networking and relationships that we have with credit card companies around the world. So the case that Juan points to, ultimately they network and map however many sites, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and then they identify 2 or 3 common payment gateways, and then they push that through the ICC system, and leveraging our relationships in our system, the credit card companies shut those merchants down, backward looking, affecting those 5,000 sites. So ultimately, Candace, it's all about collaboration. It's all about being efficient. It's not about taking 20 different shots at the same site and having 20 different folks expend resources.
I have one thing to say about this topic in Internet governance. Oftentimes the debate in Internet governance sets is between free speech and how to protect free speech in the Internet. And a lot of times there are a lot of barriers placed up for companies that are trying to protect their intellectual property rights, or people who are trying to protect their economic interests on the basis of free speech. And I think the recommendation I would give to governments would be to consider the difference between commercial speech and free speech, and to make sure that there's a very clear differentiator there, and make sure that the laws support free speech when it's non-commercial, but don't support free speech when it's commercial. Commercial endeavors should be regulated on the internet, and they should actually have to be not anonymous and not tread on the rights of others.
The comment I wanted to make to countries is that, as I said before, we need to keep up. Pirates and criminals are getting incredibly sophisticated, and they are going after the people. They are going after their personal information, their finances, and they're using their money to finance, oftentimes, serious crimes. So not only is it important to stay up to the most recent technology and techniques, but also, let me stress, and I agree with the former speakers, that it's so important to stay connected internationally and aware and be fully aware of the problem. Also, I think we all have an obligation or a duty to, as I said, maximize public attention and let people know what's going on and the risks that they may be taking. 45% of counterfeit software is coming from the internet today. Not anymore street sellers are the #1 source as we used to see in the past. Now it's the internet.
I'll chime in quickly on this. Two things that we'd have. One, I hate to be redundant, but reinforcing the point of the three-way sharing of information, which is absolutely critical. In today's environment, we have more legitimate shipments held than piracy or IPR shipments. So you, those that are here, the good companies, are being penalized because of the lack of communication and coordination with the three fronts. The second thing is, I think what we'd advise is learn from some of the past lessons and best practices are out there. So, for example, just to throw out a few red flags of the things that we do on the service provider, if we get odd requests from customers, we see big-time volume fluctuations, remote deliveries in places that just seem a little bit abnormal. CODs is not something that's commonly used by legitimate companies, so if we see a lot of CODs, that's going to be a red flag. And last but not least, when we're talking to the customers on the phone to get information, if they're reluctant to ask questions, it should raise a red flag. So learn from experience.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to open the panel up for discussion from the audience, or any questions from the audience. Do we have any questions from the audience? I see one lady over there in glasses, that side. If you can say your name and which organization you're with.
Good afternoon. I'm Josephine Svensson from Sony Mobile Communications in Sweden, and I have a question for Mr. Feldman. When it comes to internet takedowns and how you identify which are counterfeits or pirated goods, is this based mostly on trademark infringements, or do you also use design rights to locate? And if so, who does the ID, and how do you work with the identification part of what is counterfeit and what is original?
So we do actually look at design rights. We do look at, we work with several companies that have embedded technologies, and we search for violations. Almost everything on the second part of that question, which is how do we make sure that actually it's actually not a false positive. Everything is hand verified, so everything that we take down does have a set of eyes passed across it. It depends on really the organization and how that gets validated. Sometimes it's validated by our personnel. Sometimes the folks who are responsible for training border guards on how to recognize counterfeit goods actually do that process as well, because they're well skilled in identifying very quickly whether something is counterfeit or not. So it really depends on the organization, the volume, on how we hand verify it.
One more question? We'll take one more question after this. I see that gentleman over there.
My name is Tim Kuik. I work for Brein, which is a Dutch enforcement organization for copyright. What we do is we take down sites, basically, let's say rogue sites that structurally make use of infringing content. Now, we have, through litigation, and this is a question to Mr. Feldman, we have through litigation achieved that hosting providers are required to take down these sites. And there is now a code of conduct in the Netherlands whereby we can ask for this takedown, and the takedown happens without litigation. But what we of course see is that sites move abroad and they go to jurisdictions where takedown by hosting providers is not yet legislated or organized. And I feel that looking at what happens in the Netherlands, we can pretty much sweep it clean. But the lack of an obligation internationally on hosting providers to take down sites is really impeding the effectiveness of our action, and I believe that would be true for websites that offer counterfeit goods as well. So what I would like to come out of a conference like this is an agreement to really put on the pressure to get international agreement to impose such an obligation. Wouldn't you agree that that is a big necessity at this moment in time?
And that's directed to me. So I would agree that that's an important thing to do, and absolutely, when the lights are on, the roaches run to safer places. So that's definitely a trend that we see. But the fact of the matter is that this is a problem that is a holistic problem that needs to be approached holistically. People need to find those sites, and they find those sites via search engines. So we also use methods to not only find the source and take it down, but it's also important to find all the pointers to those sites and actually eliminate those as well, whether it's counterfeit goods or pirated goods. So we work with our clients who are either anti-piracy clients or anti-counterfeiting clients to actually find all of the inroads to those sites and eliminate those pointers as well.
Thank you. We'll have one last question over there, that gentleman.
Thank you. I have quick questions. My question is dedicated to Mr. Duan. For your last presentation, my question is, how does the Microsoft face the infringer of the Microsoft product? Thank you. Can you explain in more detail?
Yeah. We believe our approach to piracy, including the infringer, is education, engineering, and enforcement to the channel like CD chip I presented today. There's no silver bullet to resolve the problem. So we truly believe in these 3 E's, and we work hard on it. For consumers in particular, if that's your question, I think it's key to educate on the benefits of genuine software and the risks of genuine software. And we provide tools for them to get educated and to verify whether their software is genuine or not. And then we, among those tools, we have our How to Tell webpage, where they can go in, they can learn about the licensing of our products, and they can report piracy to Microsoft directly or to the BSA, the Business Software Alliance, so that then we can work with law enforcement to make sure that we bring those pirates and criminal organizations to justice.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for your questions and for your attention. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists for their insightful presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.